I went from waking up at 5 a.m. as a broke construction worker to now being a multi-million-dollar day trader who broke the world record for the largest prop firm payout in history. I was once a dead broke college dropout with no direction. I had to deal with losing both my parents to cancer, battled depression and all the odds against me, but now I'm a full-time professional trader. I was able to retire my wife, buy two of my dream cars, a Ferrari 488 Spider and a G-Wagon, and just recently bought a multi-million-dollar horse ranch. My name's Kyle, and this is my story. So I guess we'll start from the beginning. And there were some ups and downs throughout all of this. I'll kind of go back to where it all started. So I grew up in a small town in upstate New York as a family of four, and I've got an older brother. Both my parents are Chinese, and as you guys can imagine, there were high expectations of us. My brother was like the shining example of what a student should be. He graduated as valedictorian. He was an Eagle Scout. He ended up going to the Naval Academy. And me, on the other hand, I was probably one of the youngest cousins and children in the family, and I was really the black sheep. I was very rebellious. I didn't want to do schoolwork. I just wanted to go outside and hang out with my friends, play sports, play video games, you know, just do normal kid shit. And school, honestly, for me, was an afterthought. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be an engineer. I didn't want to be a lawyer. But coming from an Asian family, that's what's expected of you. You're supposed to get good grades. You're supposed to go the traditional route, graduate from an Ivy League school, and honestly hold a high position in society. But for me, I was just never really interested in it. I hated listening to people. I didn't want to go to school. I just wanted to have fun. And that's not to say that I got bad grades, but I was definitely a troublemaker. I was very social. I would always get in trouble with the teachers, and I was just kind of the class clown. So my parents were kind of polar opposites, and I would say that their families were also polar opposites. My mom was the school nurse, so everybody loved her. She was like the sweetest, nicest person in the entire world. And then my dad, on the other hand, was like rough and rugged. He was very handy. He was just a printer technician, and he had so much talent, but I think that he was extremely frustrated of where he ended up in life because he kind of viewed his job as like a dead-end job. He had so much potential, and he really kind of took it out on us when he got home from work. He was always cussing. He was always stressed out. He was a chain smoker. He's probably smoked 2 packs a day. And for me, you know, coming from a religious family, basically when we sat down for dinner and prayed at night, me and my brother would always pray that my dad would stop smoking. For whatever reason, he just could not do it. So it was very difficult at home seeing him battle those emotional demons and then kind of take it out on my mom, take it out on me and my brother. And it really made me resent him and made me resent listening to authority, really. So that's not to say that I didn't get bad grades in school. I was really just a slacker. I procrastinated. I still graduated with honors, but it wasn't something that it was really my focus. I wanted to just have fun. I wanted to play sports. And I think when I grew up, I wanted to be an athlete, to be honest. So the end of middle school leading into high school, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. So throughout my entire high school career, it was very stressful. I had to manage all these extracurricular activities, whether it was band or sports or just class in general. I had to do all that. And then at home, you know, my mom was crying. She was dealing with this terrible disease. She felt horrible most days. And we kind of knew that she was basically going through hell. So it was my senior year. And as you probably know, all of the seniors used to drink. We used to party. We used to have a good time. And then leading up a couple weeks before graduation, my mom's disease got worse and she ended up passing away a couple weeks before my graduation. So obviously this had a major impact on me. She was really the shining light in my life. She was the one that probably would have helped me go into college. You know, she kind of guided me along the way throughout my entire high school career. And my dad, on the other hand, really wasn't present. He really didn't care what my grades were, what I was doing. You know, he barely showed up to my soccer games or my practices, and he was really just kind of distant from us. So as you guys can imagine, going to college, as maybe some of you guys are struggling with right now, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was depressed. I just wanted to party and just have a good time. But obviously, I couldn't just drop out and not go to school because that's not the Asian thing to do. I ended up moving away from home and went to school. But when I got there, I didn't really focus on school. I ended up moving downtown, which was like an hour bus ride to campus. So as you guys can imagine, all I did was party. I skipped classes. I didn't really care because my dad was paying for it, but I just wasn't learning anything. So I ended up staying in school for about like a year and a half, and I ended up dropping out because my dad kind of gave me an ultimatum. Either I got back on track and got my grades in order, or I just had to move back home because he didn't want to keep paying for my tuition. So I ended up back home as a college dropout. Didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was basically just drinking, smoking, hanging out with friends, and I didn't want to go back to school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I figured I could just wing it and figure it out. But then one day, my friend from down the street, probably one of my best friends, I've known him since I was like 6 years old in kindergarten, he asked me to come over and smoke with him. So So I just popped in just to see what was up. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. You know, we both went away to college and we both ended up dropping out and coming back home. So I just went over to his house real quick. You know, I walked down the street and we were just hanging out. And that was when he showed me the markets. And I didn't know what it was. I was just looking at lines on a chart and they were just demo trading. And for whatever reason, this hooked me immediately. I was a rebel. I didn't like authority. And I found trading as a way out. It was something that I could do where I didn't need to listen to anybody. I could make money. It was something that kind of gave me a way out. When I looked at trading, I saw a way to make money where I didn't need to listen to anybody. And honestly, when I looked at it, it kind of felt like a video game. So I got hooked immediately. And this was around 2011. And we ended up finding this website called Forex Factory. And this is really where the rabbit hole began. So before all of social media, people used to just go onto online forums and post charts and trade strategies and economic data. So I would be on that forum nonstop. I was so involved in the space because it was just something that caught my attention from day one. You know, some people would be posting on there and I thought it was so cool because there were these older gentlemen, maybe they were 30 or 40 years old. Honestly, I didn't know how old they were. I just saw them posting online that they were full-time traders and they'd been doing it for a very long time. So I found myself diving through all these different threads, asking all these different questions, looking up and downloading all these different indicators. I probably have a folder of hundreds of indicators. I've probably tested almost every indicator on the market. And it was so interesting to me. Every little nuance to it. And I always thought that, you know, the strategy would make me a better trader. So I just kept hopping around, trying to soak in all the information that I could from this online forum. Now, I remember one of the first times that we started trading, the Fukushima power plant actually exploded and we were trading my friend's account and he actually blew up his account in a day. You know, I think it happened so fast that neither of us knew what we were really doing, but it was just exciting. I think the dopamine was going. We were kind of laughing about it. We were like, oh my God, there was this massive explosion in Japan and we could see the market react to that. So I'm sure most of you guys have probably been in that situation where you've lost a shitload of money. In my case, it wasn't even my money because I didn't even have any money at the time. I was unemployed. I was just at home. I was broke, but we were trading my friend's money because he had a job. He was working in the service industry, you know, just at a restaurant. But I think the thing is, once that happens, not only do you recognize that you could lose a lot of money really quickly, but you could also make a lot of money really quickly. And at the time, me and my buddy were just trading, you know, $100 accounts, $200 accounts. But our position sizes, you know, at the time, as a broke college dropout, $50, $100, it was a couple days worth of pay. Back then, you know, minimum wage it wasn't where it is now. So overall, I just saw the opportunity in trading and I wanted to make it work. So a couple months go by of me not working. And at some point, my dad was like, you are not doing anything. You're basically just playing Call of Duty all the time. You got to go get a job. And my aunt at the time, she was working at Price Chopper. It's just a local grocery store. And I ended up being a bag boy. So I started out bagging groceries and then I started pushing carts. And when I was in that parking lot pushing carts, I was like, this shit sucks. Like, I don't want to do this. But I was scrounging up all the money that I could, and every single paycheck, I was putting it into my trading account, And I was trying to flip that small amount of money. And it just kept going on. And I got kind of tired of it. And I really needed to look at this as something that I wanted to do as a profession. And if I wanted to really take advantage of this, I needed to go back to school. And I ended up going back to a local school. It was private, but they weren't known for finance. They were known for nursing, but they did offer business administration and finance. So I ended up going back to local school. I was working a job. I was still trading on the side. And I just thought, you know, once I get my degree, I'm going to land a job on the trading floor. Right? Simple as that. So after I graduated college, I started applying for jobs, as most graduates do. I started applying to banks, to trading floors, to anything. I couldn't even get a job as a bank teller. You know, this cycle kind of went on for a couple months and I got tired of applying to jobs without hearing back. So a buddy actually reached out to me, another good friend that I've known for a very long time, and he offered me an internship. Now, this internship wasn't a finance internship per se. It was a construction administration job. So basically, I took a chance. I didn't have anything else going for me and I just needed to get something going. And I kind of thought, you know, once I start working here for a little bit, I just need work experience. I'll keep applying to trading firms and hopefully I'll make it into like Goldman Sachs or something. So first couple weeks on the job, I fucking hated do. So I would wake up at 5 a.m. We had to drive all the way up there, be there by 7 because construction starts early and it ends early. But once the day ended at 2 p.m., we kind of had to stick around because we had other things that we had to do. And we had to meet with other people, check out the job site, see how things were going. And then it was like another hour and a half drive back home. So by the time I got home, I was completely exhausted. A couple weeks into the job, I told my friend, I don't think this really is for me, but I didn't have anything else going for me. And he basically just told me, give it an honest shot. You don't have anything else going for you. You're basically, if you leave this job, you're going to be unemployed. Like, the job market was tough at the time. This was a little bit after '08, so it was kind of a recession. And I honestly didn't have any job experience, so I couldn't get a job anywhere else. My grades weren't good. I didn't interview well, probably because I was high all the time. And honestly, I was probably just a bad employee. So I stayed at this job for a couple more years, and all along the way, I was trading at my desk. Sometimes I would be getting caught at my desk with charts up. These people probably didn't know what I was doing, but obviously when they walked past my desk and they saw, they probably knew what a chart was. When they walked past my desk and saw me, all they knew was that I wasn't doing my job. So I was getting paid like $40,000 a year, and after taxes is not a whole lot of money. I was basically living at home with my dad still. I was trying to make trading work, basically gambling with the money, spending my money on stupid stuff, clothes, video games, just partying basically and having a good time. I couldn't get out of my own way. And I think people say, you don't want to compare yourself to other people, but my friend who helped get me the job, he wasn't a college graduate. He started sweeping floors and he was probably making twice as much as I was making. And over time, I really kind of resented that. I thought I was a good employee, I wanted a shot, but it kept feeling like I was hitting a ceiling at that job. And I faced that throughout my entire working life. Anytime I got a job, I always wanted more responsibility, and they never gave it to me. The same thing happened in school. I always felt like I had more potential than what was actually being presented to me. And over time, it just got very frustrating, and I kind of took it out not only on the markets, but on myself. My confidence was extremely low. Again, I had lost my mother. I was really just lost. My dad was still chain smoking away. Even though my mother passed away from cancer, he just could not stop smoking. And that really honestly pissed me off. So I would get into fights with him all the time, and it was just like a hostile environment to be in. Well, anyways, probably 2 years after I got that job, my buddy who helped get me the job ended up leaving to another company. And at that point, I really didn't know what I was doing because he was kind of my mentor. He was showing me the ropes of construction. He was kind of, leading me down the right path and giving me all these pieces of advice to try and get paid more or try and take on more responsibility. And then he just up and left. So obviously, I didn't really have any option but to just stay where I was because I didn't really have the work experience or even know what kind of job I wanted to apply to. When you're first getting into the professional world, you see all these titles and they're all so confusing and you don't know what to look for when you're on the job site. You're like, what do my skills even fit? Well, I can do accounting, I know a little bit about finance, and I know a decent degree about trading. But putting all that together, I was putting in my resume, I'm a trader, I do financial analysis. Every job that I applied to though, never heard back from them, ever. So I just stayed at my job, traded at my desk, kept blowing up my accounts, kept going on Forex Factory and trying to find different trading strategies and, ways to educate myself, different indicators. And that was kind of just a vicious cycle. My personal and home life was a mess. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do construction and sometimes just kept drifting away. So my friend had gone on to take that new opportunity. I was basically just stuck at the same job and I wanted to give trading a real go at it. So I took basically everything I had saved up to that point. It was about $10,000. I put that into account and I really tried to swing for the fences. And you could probably guess what happened. I lost almost 30 to 40% of that account in a week. And I got so sick and tired of doing this over and over and over again. It had probably been 5 or 6 years that I was trading and this was just a vicious cycle. So I got so tired of it. I pretty much hung it up and I took out the rest of the money and I bought my wife an engagement ring. We had been together for almost 6 or 7 years prior to that and her family was pressuring me and I was trying to make trading work. It wasn't working and I just couldn't see a future in it anymore. So this really was almost my last hurrah and I hung it up and said I was going to quit forever. So even though I wanted to quit, she kind of nudged me and said, once all these other things are out of the way, once we get married and once we buy a house, we can give trading another shot. But for the time being, our priorities have to shift. But opportunity would have it that my friend actually had another position at the new company he went to. So I wanted to make more money. My trading wasn't working for me. And the position that they offered me was a junior estimator. So I took a leap of faith. They weren't going to pay me that much money, but at least it was somewhat of a salary bump because I just wasn't getting paid enough at the job that I was at. So again, I took a risk, went over to that job and started learning about construction estimating. So basically what I had to do was I would get a set of plans plans for a home. We would look at all the drawings and price out every little aspect of a home. You know, these were multi-million-dollar homes. I wasn't working at a hospital anymore. I wasn't doing blood labs. Now I was actually doing budgets. So I would get a set of plans for a $5 million home, and I had to put together pricing for a lot of different things. So I had a bit of a background in graphic design, and I was pretty artistic. So this was something that really intrigued me. I would see a set of drawings, you know, look at the cabinets, count out how many cabinet doors there were, or door hardware, and different things like that. They didn't have me doing anything complex, but over time, I kind of built up that skill set. And the interesting thing for me was I started seeing really big numbers. And up until that point in time, I was basically still broke. I was overdrafting my accounts. I was spending every little dime of my paycheck. And this really built a different skill set that I didn't have, was managing my money or managing other people's money. So as you can imagine, a $5 or $10 million home, they have a budget. And inside of that budget, there's different line items for things that need to go into their house. So they have a budget for siding, for painting, for tile, for electrical. And over time, this really built up my business prowess. Now, up until this point, trading really wasn't working for me. So I kind of put it on the back burner again and just focused on my career, because I could see a lot of my coworkers were making six figures. So if I wanted to make six figures and eventually be able to fund a real account, I just needed to put trading to the side and put all of my focus into my career. Which for a lot of you guys, if you're having a hard time and trading is really not paying the bills, you got to focus on something that's actually going to give you money. And I know it's hard to hear from me, but if you're trying to make trading work as your only thing and you're lacking money, if you just focus on what's going to generate the most income for you and just focus on that for a couple of years, you can always come back to trading in the future. And that's exactly what I did. So as I focused on my career and I got more and more involved in the business, my brain started thinking differently. You know, I wasn't dealing with $50 to $100 anymore. I was looking at budgets that started getting up towards $20 to $25 million. I would see a client spending $1 million on door hardware. I would see somebody spending $15,000 on a kitchen faucet. I mean, these were numbers that just weren't fathomable to me. But over time, I think my skill set in business and finance really started to come together, and I started seeing risk on a different level. When I looked at somebody's budget, if I had to make a decision, which at times I was solely responsible for, so I would get a set of plans and I would do the estimates, and sometimes I had to go out to vendors, and one vendor or one subcontractor would give me a price. Let's say it's for carpentry. He would give me a price of $100,000, but the other guy would give me a price for $50,000. Now, I had to make a decision on which one of those subcontractors we had to pick based on the scope of work. And if I made the wrong decision, well, the client's going to eat $50,000 of a loss if we pick the wrong person. Now, as I'm going through all these different things at work, my brain starts thinking differently about trading. And up until that point, I would put money into account, risk 10%, blow it up, risk another 10%, blow that up. Now all of a sudden I'm down 20 or 30%. And I just kept going through that same cycle over and over and over again. And mind you, I had been trading for almost 10 years now. So over time, I think I really built up some bad habits. I was trying to hit home runs. I was trying to get out of this construction career. And I wasn't playing the long game. I was playing short-term mindset. If I could hit this, payout, if I could hit this huge trade, I'll probably never have to work again. And in the construction world, I was still driving, an hour each way. I was still getting to the office at 7. Sometimes I was leaving the office at 6 p.m. And over time, this just kept wearing on me and wearing on me. And even though I had a really established career and I could see myself climbing the ladder, I always came back to trading because I knew that this just wasn't for me. It was stressful. I always had to answer to somebody. I had to answer to clients. And just overall, I didn't have a real passion for it. Even though I thought it was really cool, I just couldn't see myself doing it for 30 or 40 years, because when I looked around the office and I looked at a lot of my coworkers, they looked beaten down. They looked stressed out. All of them had gray hair. Most of them stayed at the office because their relationships back home weren't good with their spouses, and they used work as an escape. So if I had to envision myself 10, 20, 30 years from now in that same position, I didn't want to be in that same position. I wanted to be on my own. I wanted to be my own boss, and I didn't want to answer to anybody else. Now, if you guys remember, I mentioned that my dad was an avid chain smoker. He was smoking 1 to 2 packs a day, and I think it got worse and worse over time. So, at one point, he was having a really hard time swallowing, and he was very reserved. He didn't really like telling people what was going on. He never went to the doctor, obviously. As guys, we probably never go to the doctor. My wife schedules my doctor's appointments right now, but he was kind of hiding something, and we kind of knew. Me and my brother knew. And then COVID rolls around, and the whole office shuts down. So once that happened, I thought to myself, yes, now I could work remotely from home and trade while I'm working. So that's exactly what I did. People started getting laid off from my job. I didn't know if my job was going to be secure secure or not, so I really started putting more of my chips into that basket and tried to make trading work just one more time. Now, it was around this time that I was just browsing Facebook and saw an ad for FTMO. It was a prop firm, and up until that point, I didn't really have the capital to trade how I wanted to trade. I had gotten to the point where I was making about $80,000 to $85,000 for my job, but it still wasn't enough for me, and I just wanted more out of life. I think $80,000 to $85,000 was good at the time, but it still wasn't enough to buy financial freedom and go on the trips that I wanted to go on and buy the things that I wanted to buy. And not only that, my wife was stressed out from her job as well. She would come home, we would get in fights all the time, and our relationship was really rocky. So again, when I saw that there was some insecurity in my job, I had to put some more chips back into trading. So I didn't know if this prop firm was legit or not, but when I saw the price of it, I could get a $100,000 to $200,000 account for $1,000. And at that time, my paycheck was about $3,000 bi-weekly, and I kind of took a shot. I didn't have much money in the bank, but the skills that I had learned up to that point, I needed to give this one real shot, and I needed to get all my bad habits under control. So I had to stop over trading, I had to stop revenge trading, and I had to stop over leveraging. Now, if I could just do those three things and focus on what actually mattered, which is the probabilities and risk reward, I would be fine. Now, of course, a couple weeks go by, it's Thanksgiving, and at Thanksgiving dinner, my dad couldn't eat. And this was a huge red flag for us. So at one point, me and my brother had to sit down with him and ask him what was going on. And he had told us that he had esophageal cancer. And now my world was really turned upside down. There was COVID shutdowns. I couldn't leave the house. I didn't know if I was gonna have a job the next year. And I wasn't a profitable trader. So knowing that my father's time was running out, I needed to spend as much time with him. And this is something that really brought me back to trading. I said, if I could just trade for a living, then I could spend more time with the people that I love. Because at the end of the day, that's what you're all trying to do. You're trying to trade for freedom. You're not trying to trade for money. Everybody wants to trade for money, but deep down, really, you're trading for freedom. You're trading so you could spend time with your loved ones before it's too late, before we leave this earth, right? So we had bought the house for my dad. He gave us a pretty good deal on it. And he had bought a house that's down in North Carolina, down near Myrtle Beach. And because it was COVID, I asked my job, you know, my dad's sick. Can I go down and spend some time with him for a couple of weeks? Now, he was basically on his deathbed, and my job situation was very unsteady. So I started applying to new jobs. And now I actually had a real skill set. I had a niche skill set in estimating that not a lot of people know. Not a lot of people know how to read a drawing, and not a lot of people know how to put together pricing for these multi-million-dollar projects. So me, I wanted to just get paid more. I needed to make six figures. So I started putting out my resume out there, and I got some hits very quickly. So knowing that I was in that situation, this new job, it was a longer commute, but it was better pay, and it had a higher ceiling. So I ended up taking that position, even though knowing that my father was extremely sick. But I wanted to make more money. I wanted to make more money so I could take care of him, take care of my wife, you know, just set myself up for the future. Now, all my life, my brother was really kind of, again, that shining example for what a son should be. And my dad always viewed me as like the lazy kid. I, you know, really wasn't supposed to make it. I didn't think that I would have a real career. And I think this was a very emotional part of my life because on his deathbed, I was able to tell him, hey, I got this really great position. You know, I'm making $120,000 at this new job. You know, I told him about the prop firm opportunity, and I think things really started shaping up. And, you know, I think at that point, he was very, very proud of me. So a couple weeks after I started that new position, my father passes away. And I know it's probably going to sound weird, but it felt like there was some pressure that just lifted off my shoulders. I knew he was an avid chain smoker, so it kind of felt like I had been preparing for that moment for 10, 20, 30 years. You know, I was praying at the dinner table that my dad would just stop smoking. And I think at some point we just knew that that was his ultimate fate. But because I was able to turn my life around and not be the party goer or the class clown, and eventually turn my life around and actually get a real career, that was something that I was very proud of, and I think he was very proud of. And it really changed my mindset a lot when it came to trying to aim for success. Now, a realization I had up until that point was I was just fearful of so many things. I was fearful of being in a job that I didn't enjoy for the rest of my life, or not having enough money to cover expenses, or not doing what I truly loved. And ultimately, all those things were holding me back from becoming a professional trader. So along the trading journey, I had made a couple friends online, and there was one gentleman that I was talking to, and he was probably one of my closest trading buddies, and I reached out to him for some advice. And I told him everything that had happened, from me getting the job promotion to my father passing away. And I kind of just told him that I don't know if this is really what I wanted to do, because I started commuting more. I started getting a bigger target on my back because the new job that I had, now all of a sudden I went from, you know, $5 to $10 million projects to $25 to $50 million projects. And I truly was in control of all of those things. I had it felt like I had a target on my back, which when I took the job, they offered me better work-life balance. But as I got deeper into it, and I think I only stayed there for a couple months, but as I got deeper into that job, the work-life balance kind of went away. It started out pretty good, but as I got more and more projects, it started getting worse and worse and worse. And I would get home later and later, and I was just stressed out. And at that point, I kind of knew, maybe I made a mistake here. So what did the advice that my friend told me was, what are you really fearful of? Why are you so scared of just taking a leap and going full time? I had gotten some really big payouts up until that point, but I told myself I wanted to make at least 2 years salary before I took the leap to full-time trading. So I had gotten a couple payouts at FTMO, and even though they were pretty big payouts, they weren't surpassing my $120,000 a year salary. That question honestly got me to think a little bit differently. And I kid you not, the following day going into work, I was on my way commuting to work, and I almost get in a terrible accident. And I think it was honestly a godsend. I usually get to the office at like 6:30 or 7. Guess who was at the office before me? My boss. And one thing that he had told me was I couldn't sleep last night, so I came to the office early. He was having cold sweats because we had these deadlines that were due, and we had these massive projects that we needed to get done. And I honestly looked him in the eyes, and he looked very defeated. Now, I kind of finished up the day. I didn't really get a whole lot of work done because I was so distraught about, almost dying on the way to work. And then I was so stressed out because we had these deadlines that we had to meet when it wasn't even possible. I couldn't get the deadlines done because we were waiting on some vendors and we were waiting on some engineers to give us answers, but the client wanted their budget. And I had saved up enough money at this point. And it was honestly when I was sitting at my desk that I made a decision that would honestly change my life. So right after I left work, I told my boss that I wasn't coming in the following day and that I wouldn't be giving them 2 weeks notice. Now, I know you're probably thinking, that's not really the professional thing to do, but I was honestly just so fed up with the job. They promised me things that didn't come to fruition, and I needed to take a chance on myself. I had saved up enough money to get myself by for at least 6 months, and I needed to give this one honest shot. If it took me a year and I had to go get a job in a year, or if I had to go get a job in 6 months, that I was gonna do it. Because that fear of maybe not having that job was really honestly holding me back. But if I had to really deeply think about it, what my friend asked me is, what are you really fearful of? I had gotten that job in a week or 2 weeks. So I had this skill set that I knew I could get a job from, and the only thing that was stopping me was myself. So after that day, I put in my resignation letter and I became a full-time trader. Now the real test came. Could I actually replicate this as a full-time trader for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Now the first couple months were good. I got a couple payouts, everything was jolly, and then I went through a deep drawdown period. I probably didn't make any money for 2 months, and I really found myself in the trenches. And when you're in a drawdown and you don't know when that next payout is gonna come, it almost feels like you're never gonna be a profitable trader again. And this is really where the mental battle comes into play. But I had built up so much resilience through my childhood, everything that I experienced between my parents, and all the adversity that I had faced. And I kind of stared it in the face and just told myself and reaffirmed to myself that I could do this, that I was just going through a rough period. And it wasn't long before I started hitting consistent payouts. And then I started getting more and more capital. And at one point, I think it was 4 or 5 months into my full-time journey that I was actually managing about $3 or $4 million in prop capital. And I was pulling in at least $20,000 to $30,000 every single payout, every single month. Now, this went on for the better part of 2 years, and I was consistently making these payouts. And then my Forex funds shut down. And then more and more firms started shutting down. And it honestly felt like I was back at square one. MetaTrader got banned, a lot of CFD firms started banning US clients, and I had to pivot to futures. So through the course of that run leading up to my Forex funds shutting down and some other firms shutting down, I had made almost $1.2 million from CFD prop firms. And then I got hit with another challenge. I needed to find more funding. Because even though I made a lot of money with CFD prop firms, I still wanted to trade prop because the risk reward opportunity was good. And the only other opportunity was futures. Now, the transition to futures was a little bit harder for me because those markets moved a lot differently. People were scalping them more. They weren't swing trading. The rules were different. There was intraday trailing drawdown at Apex, but I saw the opportunity there also. There were traders like Trader Kane who hit a $2 million payout. Now that honestly sparked motivation in me. I wanted to hit the futures firms hard. Now, if you can imagine, there was a bit of a learning curve for me. I couldn't hold trades overnight. I had to trade smaller size because the drawdowns were tighter. So of course I blew hundreds of accounts and I found myself in drawdown again. But honestly, the principles that I came back to that got me back on track with this were the principles that allowed me to go full time in the first place. I had to stop thinking about the money. I just had to show up to the charts and trade my process and stop thinking so much about everything. If I just kept things simple, if I stuck to my risk management and if I stuck to the process and not worried so much about each trade, that I would be able to take advantage of these futures firms. So a couple months go by and I'm still in drawdown. I'm still trying to figure out the futures firms. And then Trump goes into office. Now he starts talking about tariffs and all these headlines are moving the market like crazy. And I started taking insane advantage of it. First of all, I got the trailing drawdown to stop at Apex, which gave me some breathing room. And then the market started moving 500, 1,000 points a day. And it wasn't before long that I found myself making $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 days. And it was all because I was focused on the process. I wasn't focused on how much money I was making. If I made a $50,000 day or I lost $50,000, or if I made $250,000, I would do the same thing every single day. I wasn't going out and celebrating at night. I would just work out, have a healthy dinner, sit back in my charts the next morning and do it all over again. There was honestly no highs or lows. I was just operating robotically. Because mind you, at Apex, you can't withdraw the full amount. So early in those payout cycles, I had probably $300,000 in profits at Apex, but I could only withdraw like $55,000 each payout cycle. And each payout cycle was 8 trading days, which means I basically had to force myself to trade every single day. Even though I probably don't trade the best that way, the markets were moving so much that I just really took advantage of it. Now, there were probably some days where I broke my rules and I probably overtraded, but the market kept offering opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And as my buffer got bigger and bigger, I was able to trade bigger and bigger size. Now, for most of you guys watching, you probably wouldn't understand the level of risk tolerance and discipline that you need to have to trade that size. And if I had to go back and restart my entire journey again, I don't think I would do anything differently. The career that I had and the job skills that I learning how to manage big risk and big numbers. You know, when I was trading $50,000 to $100,000 positions at Apex, to me, that was just another day at the office when I was working construction. Again, remember, I was working with budgets of $25 to $50 million. I had vendors that I had to pay $1 million for a staircase railing, or had snow melt system where people didn't want to shovel their driveways, right? Somebody was spending $500,000 on that. Now, the perfect storm of a proper trading process, volatility in the markets, and enough funding and enough of a buffer at these firms, I was able to withdraw $2.5 million in a single payout. So in total from prop firms, I've made roughly $4.5 million. But if it wasn't for everything that occurred in my early life and my job, all those little lessons that I learned along the way honestly made such a huge difference in getting those results. You know, it was honestly the small things that I just really wasn't looking at that had an abstract impact on my trading performance. You know, what was my environment like? Was I in a hostile environment? Was my relationship at home good? Was I eating healthy? Was I working out properly? Was I actually disciplined? I think if I was stuck in that chaotic life, I don't think this would have been possible. Because when I was trading in the zone, I was at peace. There was serenity. When I sat down in front of the charts, I wasn't worried about where the money would come from, if I had bills to pay. When I sat down in front of the charts, I honestly had to shut out all the noise and just focus on proper trading. The numbers on the screen didn't matter. The P&L on the screen didn't matter. All that mattered was that I was taking good trades. Now, if I had to look back at my trading career and tell you why most traders fail, it's not because of the strategy. It's because of everything that they have going on in life. Maybe it's their personality. Maybe it's their environment. Maybe it's the relationships that they have. Maybe it's their diet. Maybe it's not getting enough exercise. Maybe you're just not disciplined. Maybe you're impatient. Maybe you're impulsive. Leading up to this success, I could tell you I probably struggle with every single one of those. And this is why I think trading is a mirror. It forces you to address things about yourself and your environment that you would never think of before. And honestly, looking back at the journey, I could say that I've become a better person and not a better trader. So if you're watching this video and you're going through hard times just like I did, you have to take a deep, hard look at yourself and figure out how you're going to transform yourself into the trader that you want to be. And I know if you guys are honest with yourself and what's holding you back with your trading, you will become a better trader. So I kind of want to just leave you guys with just this last message. No matter where you guys are in life, I don't care if you guys are still in high school, I don't care if you guys are far older than me, there's always a chance for you guys to be able to turn your life around for the better. And remember, we only have one life. I would hate to be on my deathbed looking back at the life I lived and saying, I wish I did this, or having any sort of regrets. So you guys might as well take that leap of faith just like I did. You guys might as well take the risk, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't play out, at least you tried. And the worst case scenario is that you're in the exact same position that you started out in. I know that every single one of you has the potential to be amazing and super successful. So I love and appreciate you guys. If you're having a hard time trading and you just want something that's simple, that's easy to understand, make sure you check out the video I just dropped. It's a stupid simple strategy that should help you out a ton. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.